So if you're still using Boolean variables to keep data fetching state for like isLoading or error or isSuccess for your React components, then you're probably doing it wrong. So in this video, we're going to explore why using like setLoading and isLoading, like separate variables for different states of your data fetching when you try to fetch data inside of your React components is pretty bad, and how you should completely avoid that by unifying it into string variables. So because we have data fetching in React is completely unopinionated, everybody does it on its own way. Somebody uses isLoading, somebody uses different Boolean variables, somebody tries to keep state in variables instead of like Boolean variables, and so on and so forth. And of course, there are so many ways, and because there are so many ways, it creates inconsistencies. That means it creates more and more bugs, harder to read code, and makes our component lifecycle state very hard to manage. So for instance, as we all know that React has a really awesome hook that is called UseEffects that basically allows us to basically run our fetching or side effects like fetching or doing something like that when the component is mounted and actually ready to fetch data from an API or from a server or do something completely outside of the scope of the actual component. Or if you are the guy who prefers to use other libraries like query libraries like the 10-stack query or the React query as we all know it, or the SWR, which are like libraries that actually helps us fetch and cache data and actually takes care of everything behind the scenes for you, from fetching to caching data to providing you with like a state lifecycle and data lifecycle, and gives you like booleans out of the box. So all you just do, you just call a function inside of your component and you're not going to be worrying about anything else. I mean, I really recommend using one of these libraries like the React query or the SWR. There are many other libraries, but I mainly love the React query because it's simple. It's very, very popular. A lot of people love that one, including me. So I intend to use this one in any project I basically go through. Or if you prefer to use your own data fetching system with UseEffects and a bunch of stuff, well, you gotta make sure you do it right. So let's say we have this simple products page where we just simply, all we do, we just have a React component that actually fetches product from an API server that has a list of products with a pricing and the rating of the product, the name of the products in here, and the ability to add the products into the cart. And just we got a plethora of products in here, from cosmetics to technology products like laptops and phones and different stuff. Now let's look behind the scenes of how this one actually works and what is the best way to handle the different life cycles or different states of data fetching, from loading to success or error. So let's start with the most basic way, which is the wrong way, which a lot of people actually tend to do, is with isLoading. So for example, in here we have a product component. This product component just takes a simple prop with different details of product, from like a title, description, price, rating, and so much more, and it basically just returns a JSX that renders a simple product. And next we have this with isLoading.jsx, which is the components that's actually responsible for fetching the data and rendering the different products. So simple in here, it has a method that does actually fetching. So it's fetch product, it's an asynchronous method, and all it does in here, it calls Axios, it goes to the API, fetch the response, it grabs the product from the response in here, and it simply goes through the set products in here and sets products inside of that. And of course, it calls the fetch product inside of UseEffects in here, and it just like goes ahead and render that through like, products.map, and it maps every single product into all the, single products or single product components we have already created. Okay, simple enough. That's actually pretty simple. That's the normal way to do things. Oh, cool. Now let's see how we are handling the different data fetching state of our component. So here we have products, which is we do use state for storing the different products we fetch. That's cool. Now we have this isLoading, error, and isSuccess. So these three independent variable, each one of them actually holds a different state at each time, which means like here we have isLoading, so it tells us, oh, if the data fetching is still going on or not. So if we are still ongoing or fetching data is actually in progress, so it's not complete yet. And if it's complete and has any error, we can just have this error in here with a string. Or if it's success and actually successfully fetches the products, we can have this isSuccess to equals to true. I mean, that looks pretty simple, right? You're wrong. I know a lot of beginners actually tend to do that, and they get the intensive to actually go through and actually do the same thing in here and have every single state stored differently. but that's actually really bad. So let's see why that actually is bad. So here on fetching products, first go ahead and do set loading, which is a different variable, like an independent variable. This is actually going to turn it to true, right? So it's going to start the fetching, cool, everything. Now, when it's actually done, because here I'm throwing an error, so you don't really need to worry about that. It was just like for testing. So if products is equals to true, and if we have the products and all good, we can set the product on the state and we can do set success, which means we're going to tell a component we have successfully fetched the product, you can go through. Otherwise, if we have an error in here, we can set the error message and that's going to populate the error. Now here we have the three different states. So if it's success, this is going to turn to true, but if it's actually a success and the loading is still in true. So it's really inconsistent because our component right now has two different states for a fraction of a millisecond before this runs, because once this actually runs, it's going to make it false and all good. But in a fraction of a millisecond, isLoading is going to be true and success is going to be true. I mean, that doesn't make sense. We can't be loading and success at the same time. I mean, only a single one, either success, error, or loading can be true at a single time. If it doesn't do that, I mean, that actually breaks the rule of how state works. And of course, down here we can do, oh, if it's loading, we can just be returning that one. And the complicated part, which I really hate, is actually when you try to render stuff. So before you do products.map, you have to make sure that there's no error. So you do not error, and you have to do success. Then you actually can access, which I find pretty annoying because this could get really hard if you have more code and more independent UI that's actually depending on whether it's success or not, or error or not, and so on and so forth. And the same thing goes for the error in here. So like if you have an error or not success, I mean, that actually really depends on both of these variables. Now, let's see why this is actually bad. Let's go ahead and look into the better version of this and how we can actually approach, instead of having three different independent state variables in here for holding a single state, into more of a consolidated way. So here we go to the with status, and I'm gonna go have the same thing in here, products. We have with status, and this is actually how we do it. Now, we no longer do isLoading or something, so we no longer keep that isLoading. We no longer have isSuccess. We only need the error in here because we wanna need like to keep the actual error message so we can display the actual error message. But this isn't basically to check current state of the component. And of course we have products, pretty simple. Now, the most important part in here and the correct part is to have a single status state that is called status. And this one actually holds a single status that holds a string of the current state of the component, or basically the current data fetching state of the component. So here you have use state, and here I actually declared, there's actually many ways to do that, but the best way I think so far, and is the simplest one that's going to make a lot of sense for a lot of people and developers working on the same code base, is to have this on an object. So if, for example, I declared fetch status in here, I put it inside of like fetch status.js, or this could be like used globally for all components, but this actually can be like, oh, ideal for, you know, when the component is not doing anything, it's not doing any data fetching at all, loading when data fetching is actually in progress, success if it's done, and error if there is an error. And this will make sure there is only a single one that is actually selected at a single time. So you can't have success and loading at the same time, because the variable is going to hold a single value at a single time. And that's going to fix a lot of issues, and it's going to make it a lot better and way much more logical of how a component should work. Now, use state in here is going to be ideal first. It's going to start with ideal. I'm going to start fetching products. We're going to do no longer doing set loading here. We only change the status. That's basically all we need to change. So we do set status. Now, the status of the component here is loading. Cool. We load the data. I'm just doing here, wait 5 seconds just for testing purposes, of course. And if the products are good, we set the products and we change the status of the component into success. Now, it's no longer loading. It doesn't happen the same, like we don't have the same issue as before where we have it is loading and is true at the same time before this one is literally cold in here for a fraction of a millisecond. No, this is no longer happening. It only keeps a single state at a single time, and that makes a lot of sense. And the same thing goes for the error in here. We change the status to error and we set the error message in here so we can display it to people. And that's it. The same thing for use effect. Now, you can actually use this helper kind of like variables in here where you can do, oh, is loading equals status. So is loading is going to be true if the status is loading or success or error in here. You can basically completely ignore that one, but I find people loving this way. So you can just do it like that way in here, and you can check, oh, if it's loading, you can do it that way. And the most important part that I really like now, it makes the code looks a lot easier. Now, because only one state is going to be happening at a single time, that means we've got this is success is going to only happen a single time. So we don't need to check if it's an error or loading or not, because it's only going to be is success. And if it's actually is success, or if it's in the success state, that means it can't be in any other state. It only can be in success, and it's actually success. And that's actually truthful. So if it's success, we can render the product. If it's an error, we can just render the error in here. As simple as that. That makes it a lot simpler. Now our components is way much more logical. It doesn't have any issues. It doesn't have any logical fetching and state issues. The component is as supposed to be written. And of course, if you try that one like with status or with isLoading, they all gonna be looking the same thing. So you're gonna have some loading here, wait a couple of seconds, maybe you're gonna see an error, just a single state at a time. Or if you remove like the throw in here and go back, try the loading again in here, it's gonna load for a couple of seconds and it's gonna show us all the products. Now, when I before said that you should go with something like React Query or SWL library, where, you know, this kind of fetching sort of like asynchronous state management libraries, that's gonna actually take a lot of burden for you. They do a lot of stuff behind the scenes. They give you a simple, really nice, awesome, and easy to use API. So technically here, if you try to use like React Query, I have an example in here with React Query. So simply we do like use query, we provide it with like, you know, keys in here, just a unique key so it knows exactly what query. We provide it with the fetch products, which is simply just fetching using Axios through something like through a specific API URL, returns the data in here as products, simple as that. And you give it this tail time in here, like when it needs to refresh the cache and when it needs to like behind the scenes does another fetching, or basically another API request. Now here, if we notice the most important part, the status. So the status in here could be either error, success, or loading. Like only a single one, either loading or success or an error can be happening at a single time. And here it provides you like with helpers or helper variables like is loading and is success or is error, the same way we're doing it, where we keep a single source of truth, a single like status state, which is the source of truth. And basically in here we give it, we can go ahead and like say destructuring or just make it a little easier, but just bind those into a specific variables like is loading, is success, or is error. That's why I said React Query could be a lot easier in here than just going ahead and like inventing the wheel by yourself and getting into these troubles and issues with isLoading or how to fetch properly and use effects. I mean, I've already did a video before about use effects and why it's bad for doing it and why you should use React Query, because it's a lot better. It's going to fix a lot of issues for you. And look how simple the component using React Query in here versus the one component we have in here. So anyway, guys, thank you for watching. See you guys hopefully in the next one.